makes frequent spelling errors on both phonetically regular and on sight words. He has particular difficulty reading and spelling the demon phonograms, such as AU, which says ah, or OU, which actually can say different things, but he has difficulty with each one of them, whether he's saying ow or ooh. Tim is beginning not to like reading, unfortunately. He is responding more readily and accurately to questions on stories or information that are read to him than material he reads himself. So we're seeing that he's better, as we said before, in listening comprehension than reading comprehension. His responses that he gives orally are much more complex than what he's able to put in writing. And as we said before, his written responses are kind of restricted by his concern to use words that he can spell. And very nicely, he likes and does well in math. Let's take a look at results of an informal assessment of reading done on Tim, grade 2. For purposes of instruction, Tim's teacher conducts an informal assessment of reading. She wants to see which letter sound associations he has mastered for reading and spelling. She finds out that there are many gaps in his knowledge of letter sound associations. She times his reading on a grade level passage and sees that his fluency is well below the average rate for his grade. She knows that he is reading below his true potential for literacy because he understands the meaning of passages much better when she reads to him rather than when he reads passages himself. Let's take a look at Tim's cognitive correlates. This is something that the teacher observes in class. She sees that his processing speed is slow for all tasks requiring scanning a line of print, even math tasks, such as recognition of patterns of shapes or numbers. She sees that his working memory is poor, as observed in difficulty following oral directions. She doesn't think that Tim is having difficulty with orthographic processing, attention, or executive function. So let's take a look at Tim's intervention. Tim is given help by his school district. He receives structured literacy instruction in a small group in his classroom and improves somewhat. Seeking better progress, the intensity of instruction is increased by reducing the group size, increasing the number of phonics lessons per week, and using multisensory reading strategy. Tim is given accommodations for reading and spelling. Assistive technology is introduced. Tim's frustration in reading, spelling, and writing is somewhat reduced. Then grade 4 happens. Now Tim is expected to learn through reading expository texts. In these texts, it is more difficult to use context to determine vocabulary words. Text is denser and there are fewer pictures. The reading demands have been ramped up and the writing demands have been ramped up. Writing assignments are longer and much more demanding. Tim needs as much help as ever. He continues to receive help in small group instruction. His teacher previews reading vocabulary. She teaches strategies for comprehension of expository text, as well as strategies for writing. Assistive technology and accommodations help a lot. Needless to say, Tim continues to benefit from intense reading instruction using multisensory strategies. Tim ultimately has a relatively comfortable and successful elementary school experience. Now Tim's in middle school, and the bar is raised again. Tim's low rate of reading remains, of course, as research shows, and he has difficulty keeping up with the volume of work as the demand for reading increases. He continues to receive fairly intensive support. He is overwhelmed by multiple assignments from a variety of different teachers as he changes classes in middle school. And he has a lack of effective strategies for studying. So in addition to his in-class support, Tim is assigned to a study skills class. Tim works very hard and is ultimately successful in middle school. Tim is in high school and the bar is raised again. He remains a slow reader. He has difficulty reading quickly enough to keep up with the volume of work. He continues to be overwhelmed by multiple assignments. He lacks effective strategies for studying the more advanced subjects that he's studying in high school. His residual problems in spelling remain, and written work remains very difficult. However, with lots of support, inclusive classroom, accommodations, assistive technology, but most importantly, Tim's hard work and intent to succeed, Tim does okay in high school. Ultimately, Tim is a success story. He graduates from high school with a 3.2 GPA. He's well liked by peers and teachers. He excels in baseball and basketball. He's recruited by colleges. He selects a college with a support program. He uses assistive technology and accommodations throughout college and grad school. He continues to be a hard worker. Tim is comfortable with his dyslexia and proud of his level of achievement. Ultimately, Tim, like so many other students with dyslexia, is a success story.
This slide is included as an opportunity for you to pause and discuss the material presented so far. The second section of the webinar will discuss screening, assessment, and accommodations for dyslexia and other language-based reading disabilities.
Hello, this is Allison Pankowski
and Maria Kimmins.
Welcome to the next section of the webinar. We know from kindergarten through third grade, growth in reading skills is rapid, and students who are falling behind can be helped more easily than at any other age. This is why early intervention is so important. We know from research that closing the gap between poor readers and good readers is easiest when problems are identified early. Response to intervention, also known as a multi-tiered system of support, is a prevention approach, so we do not wait to identify those students at risk for reading failure. It typically involves 3 tiers. Tier 1 is when students who receive instruction in an evidence-based reading program, and universal screening is done on all students, and 80% of students typically will respond to this approach. Those determined to be at risk receive evidence-based intervention, and students can move between the tiers according to their rates of progress. This model is designed to improve outcomes for all students and includes 6 components. Essential is that data must be used in a productive manner. Time must be built into the day for teachers to analyze data and employ problem-solving protocols on a consistent basis. And this data must be used to make instructional decisions for students based on what the data tells them about what the student has actually learned. Another essential component is there's a shared leadership between general ed education, special education, and administration. There are 4 types of assessments to be familiar with. The first type of assessment is a screening assessment, which answers the question, which of our students might need some extra assistance in order to be academically successful? Screening tools are a rough indicator of risk and are administered to all students. They don't diagnose, but let you know who could be at risk for future reading failure. Diagnostic assessments give details on what students' academic knowledge and skill level is and inform instruction. So what are this student's academic strengths and weaknesses? Progress monitoring assessments help us know if learning is happening. Once students are found at risk and are in intervention programs, progress monitoring helps us know how they're doing. These assessments are brief and frequently occur between 1 to 3 weeks. And the last type of assessment is outcome assessments. And those are typically high-stakes testing so that we can know if our students are making progress towards meeting the standards. So let's talk about universal screening, which should be part of a Tier 1 in a response to intervention or multi-systems of support model. So universal screening, first of all, is based on over 30 years of research on curriculum-based measurement. There are standardized procedures that must be followed for administering and scoring these screening measures in order for them to be reliable and valid. Typically, screening happens 3 to 4 times a year for all students. Curriculum-based measurement is efficient, cost-effective, and brief. Many of the probes only last 1 minute in time. They're typically less expensive than a more extensive diagnostic battery. And training for teachers does not usually take very long. You're basically taking vital signs for students. It is not diagnostic in nature. So let's take a look at curriculum-based measurements that would be appropriate to administer at the kindergarten level. Phonemic awareness and rapid automatic naming are the 2 biggest predictors of future reading difficulties. So when we are assessing students at the kindergarten level, we're going to be assessing first sound fluency. So you give the student a word, can they identify the first sound in it, like lamp, and the students say, oh. Letter naming fluency, where students are shown a page of letters and they need to name the letters in 1 minute. Letter sound correspondence, where students give the sound that matches the letter shown. Phoneme segmentation fluency, where students are given a word orally, like sick, and asked to say each sound in the word. So the correct response would be s, I, k. Nonsense word fluency, which are phonetically regular pseudo words. And then other screeners also include picture naming vocabulary, spelling assessment, and then blending of onset and rhymes. Again, onset and rhymes is when we have the word bat, the b is the onset, and the at is the rhyme. So what does this look like? The first example can be a letter naming fluency probe, where the teacher would place the probe in front of the student and have a record-keeping document for herself or himself. They would ask the student to name the letters going across the page and down each row, and time the student for 1 minute, recording any errors that are made. The other probe that's displayed on the screen is a nonsense word fluency probe. Students would be instructed with practice items to put the sounds together to read the nonsense word. Students can be told that if they cannot read the nonsense word, then they can just say the sounds of the letters. Again, the instructor is timing for 1 minute and recording errors on the probe. So the first line would read Naj, Bez, Ruz, Biv, Yep. In first grade, phonemic awareness and rapid automatic naming continues to be an important predictor. You'll notice that some of the probes are similar to the ones that were given in kindergarten. However, you have to remember that the norms for these probes will change since students are a year older. So again, letter naming fluency can be given, phoneme segmentation fluency, as well as reading a list of real words out of context, so not in sentences, nonsense word fluency, letter sound fluency, and oral reading fluency. Some screeners, again, can include things like picture naming vocabulary, spelling by sound, retell fluency, and word use. Here is what an oral reading fluency probe would look like. This would be the teacher's version, and the student's version would not have the numbers on the side. The teacher would say, "Please read this story to me. If you do not know a word, I will read it for you. Please do your best reading so that you can tell me all about the story when you finished." Once the student begins reading, the teacher would start her timer. And then at the end of 1 minute, she would ask the student to stop reading and retell the story. In grades 2 and 3, you can continue giving an oral reading fluency probe, as well as asking kids to read real word lists in isolation and nonsense word lists. There is also a probe called Reading Maze, and that could be given to a group of students at the same time. Students would be given a passage where every seventh word is replaced by a blank line and 3 choices. Again, this is a timed measure where students would be reading on their own and circling the correct word to complete the blank. In addition, spelling assessments can be done at this age. Oral reading fluency explains reading comprehension test results from about mid-first to the end of 3rd grade. So typically, oral reading fluency probes are used from 1st grade to 3rd grade, and that by 5th grade, verbal reasoning, vocabulary, and background knowledge become more important to overall reading achievement. When selecting a screening tool, you should focus on 3 categories. The first category, predictive validity, is a measure of how well the tool will predict future performance, matching with actual performance. We have to know what is being predicted and how far in the future. Classification accuracy allows us to know which students are at risk and which students are not at risk. Screeners with good predictive validity always have good classification accuracy. Normative scoring allows us to compare scores better than cut scores such as at risk, low risk, some risk. And it allows us to better track performance over time. Without normative scoring, we do not know how far above or below the cut scores a student has performed. To help individuals decide on a screening tool, the Center on Response to Intervention has created a screening tools chart that will give you information on the predictive validity, classification accuracy, and normative scoring of screening tools that you could select. If your school has not selected a screening tool at this moment in time, teachers can still perform informal measures of phonological awareness and rapid automatic naming so that they can identify students who may be at risk for reading failure. Teachers can then take this data to someone else, like the INRS team, guidance counselor, child study team. So, informal measures of phonological awareness would include things like word discrimination. Can the child tell the difference between words like star, log? Are these the same, different? Bed, bed. Are these the same or different? Rhyme recognition would be when you give the student 3 words and ask them to tell you which 2 rhyme. Onset rhyme has students identify the B as the onset or b as the onset and at as the rhyme. Rhyme production, asking students to give you a word that rhymes with a target word, such as tree, and you would be looking for them to say bee. Syllable blending. If I say cup, cake, fast, it would be cupcake. Can the student put those two parts together? Syllable segmentation would be taking apart. So if I said the word cupcake, can they take it apart to say cup, cake? Syllable deletion would involve activities such as saying the word rainbow. Now say rainbow without saying rain, and can the student say bow? Phoneme recognition tasks would be asking the student to tell you a word that starts like cat, and it would be important to note for this task, if the student said kite, it is correct because both C and K make the k sound. A phoneme blending activity would be giving the students sounds and asking them to say the word k, a, t, and they say cat. For phoneme segmentation, it goes in the opposite way. You say the word cat and ask them to tell you each of the individual sounds. Sometimes young students need to use a block or a chip as a tangible manipulative to push a block forward as they say each sound. And then the last task, a phoneme deletion task, would be, I'm going to say the word seat, but if I don't say ts, what would it be? A teacher can then have the scores for all of the students in their class and use the students' scores to identify strengths and weaknesses. An informal measure of rapid automatic naming can also be created by a teacher. For color naming, you would use 4 or 5 colors that the student knows and either put out those blocks or create a color chart arranged in random order. You'll need about 50 items to do this task. You're going to ask the child to name the colors as quickly as he or she can, while you're recording the time that it takes to be completed. Then you can compare this with other students in your classroom to get a general idea of their rapid automatic naming skills. This can also be done with object naming, such as a row of 4 to 5 objects like cup, tree, boat, house, or letter naming.